If you guys have been following the War and Pop Culture series or any other live streams that we've done, you know that I've been very critical of tokenization. I've expressed my displeasure for it, and I find it unnecessary. I find it lazy. Um, so, what I want to do today is respond to a comment or a post that that I responded to a few days ago, and to the person that did this post, don't take this as a personal attack. All right. This is just me responding to your comments. And of course, you can take it however you will. But I wanted to make this response because the response itself is something that I've heard many, many times in the subject of tokenization. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read the initial post. I'm going to read my response to the post, and then I'm going to read the response to my response. And then I'm going to read through it again and break it down paragraph by paragraph, sort of in a nice and neat format. So the post says, "It doesn't matter if a character is played by a black actor instead of a white actor. The right person is the right person." I respond, "So what happens if it's the other way around?" The response, "Talking about fictional characters here, and given that most black fictional characters are created around and about the black experience in some way, whitewashing that really goes against that experience. But a black man or woman playing Batman, Superman, Catwoman, Gordon, Spider Man, sure. Now, most, yes, we get brand new characters taking up that mantle, like Val Zod, Miles Morales, or like Fox. And most times that's easier and works better because then they can have their own stories and be their own characters. But white people playing black roles is not really the same thing. Could it work with some roles? Maybe. Who's to say a white kid playing Static Shock wouldn't work? But again, most black fictional characters are about the black experience and the years and years of shit that the black community has gone through. It's not the same as the white experience, which has been pretty privileged and spoiled as fuck. So that's where the difference comes in. But again, these are fictional characters, so they're not real, lol. If they ever tried to make a white guy as Black Panther work, I'll give it a shot. I think it would fail because it kind of goes against the character, what the character is, but sure, I'll watch. But a black Catwoman, hey man, it's been done since the 1960s, and it's perfectly fine. Or a black Spider Man. Like Spider Man said, anyone can wear a mask. Wear the mask. A black Jim Gordon, cool. It's still Jim Gordon. I'm cool with what works. Whatever works. All right, so there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to go, like I said, paragraph by paragraph. Talking about fictional characters here, and given that most black fictional characters are created around and about the black experience in some way, whitewashing that really goes against that experience. Well, you're going to have to define what the black experience is. And the thing is that whenever you talk about the experience of a certain ethnic group, you're going to get varying results as far as what their experience of life is. For example, a black American's life experience in the United States is going to be very different from a African in Africa because of the culture, because of the geographical landscape. There's going to be a lot of differences. Moving on. But a black man or woman playing Batman, Superman, Catwoman, Gordon, Spider Man, sure. Okay, so very brief, but what I always find hilarious is that people just randomly and nonchalant say, yeah, I don't mind having a black Spider Man, black Superman, black Batman, any variant of characters that we already got. And that's what I always find hilarious is because why do we need these variants? And if you're doing it, like what Hollywood usually does, which is doing it for an agenda, pushing some sort of social, political, identity politics agenda, then yeah, I get exactly why they're doing it. But if you don't think that's what's going on, then you are horribly naive and you're actually ignorant on the whole sort of social media landscape and the thick air of identity politics and how it's been used, particularly since I want to say 2010, because I've been following this stuff since 2010. That's where I personally noticed the sort of upward trend of identity politics based actions and behavior. And, if you control the pop culture, then you basically can control everything else. Well, if you control the culture, you can control everything else. Because usually you'll hear people say the one thing that you don't discuss with people is religion and politics. Okay. So if you can't be united or don't want to be united by religion and politics, then the next best thing would be pop culture, right? Movies, TV shows, video games, music, etc. And if we can't even be peaceful, so to speak, on that, or we're being pitted against each other over these things, then I mean, on top of the fact that you're ruining good entertainment or what used to be good entertainment, you're dividing people even more. And I think that's an agenda that's being pushed, especially in the higher echelons of power. But I mean, obviously, you can just look out your window, metaphorically speaking, and you can see different social media platforms that are pushing this sort of race war thing. Some people will say that there isn't a race war being pushed, at least from, for example, uh, trying to get black people riled up to go against white people, or that there isn't an agenda against white people, which there is. All you have to do is look at any time any kind of supposed white supremacist or Trump supporter based thing. It's always a Trump supporter or it's always some racist white guy, as if to say that every white person is racist. That's sort of how the media likes to portray white people. You just look at how they treat them, you know, and we're going to get into that as this post goes along. Now, yes, we get brand new characters taking up that mantle. Eric July. Mantle. Mantle. Mantle argument. Like Valzad, Miles Morales, or like Fox, and most times that's easier and works better because then they can have their own stories and be their own character. So, if you guys have listened to Eric July, Young Rippa 59 on YouTube, you could say that he's one of the biggest experts about tokenization. He's clearly defined it. He's made several videos about it. So go check out his channel if you want to, dive in more about the specifics of tokenization. But one of the things that he's made clear is that tokenization of pre-existing characters is lazy. And it's easy to do in the sense that making profits off of it, because when you compare trying to make an original character versus making a tokenized character, the tokenized character has the benefit of name brand recognition and marquee value. Meaning that if you're to make a black Spider-Man, i.e., Miles Morales, people are going to buy the comic series or go watch the movie because it has the name Spider-Man. Now, we all know who the real Spider Man is, Peter Parker. That's the original Spider Man. That is, as far as I'm concerned, the only real Spider Man. Everyone else is, like cosplayers trying to make a quick buck. And the thing is that a lot of these tokenized characters, they don't do very well in regards for comic sales. Yet, Marvel and DC will continue reprinting them because they can still suck people in. And they know that some people will buy it, but the majority won't. And then when you get a movie done by Hollywood, then you're going to bring in even more people, because the truth is that most people don't read comic books. And a lot of people, not all, but a lot, know about these characters because of the films, not because of the comics. They may have heard of the comics, they may have seen them here and there, heard people talk about them. With that said, by and far for the most part, people do not pick up comic books and read them. So these movies are being made for people that generally don't read the comics. And that's why they mostly succeed. Because if you have a movie with a character that's blatantly tokenized or altered in such a way that it's unrecognizable from how they are in the comics, then most comic fans would be upset, especially if it's a character that they really love. Whereas the normie who doesn't know about the history of the character will blindly eat it up and say, yeah, I like this stuff. That's why Into the Spider-Verse is so popular, because it's Black Spider-Man, or different versions of Spider-Man. Nobody, well, I don't want to say nobody, but a lot of people that are enjoying this film, they don't know the history of Spider-Man. They don't know that Miles Morales wasn't exactly popular, but because they brought him into the mainstream, into Hollywood and film, they made some bucks off of it, and now they think to themselves, oh, well, we're gonna make more movies, and that's why you're getting a sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, right? It's gonna be like a two-parter.
That's what you got. To sit up here and call something like Spider-Man, I'm gonna be blunt as I possibly can. To sit up here and call something like Spider-Man a mantle is fucking retarded. It's retarded. It makes no sense. Spider-Man, considering his backstory, and this is what he called it, even in the Ultimate Comics, year 2000, Peter Parker specifically said he was a one-of-a-kind situation because he got bit by a one-of-a-kind spider. What are the odds? Walking in, radiation experiment or whatever. Spider gets in the middle of that. Spider then turns around and bites Peter Parker. Peter Parker now has Spider-like fucking powers. What are the odds of that happening to someone else, right? In the first place. It was his mind, his scientific mind. Yeah, I know he's doing the whole wrestling thing to try to get money and shit. But it was his scientific mind creating a suit. First of all, figuring out what happened. That was all up here. Creating a suit. That was all him, right? That was something unique for him. That was unique for his experience. To sit up here and say that's a mantle is nonsense. It was never created to be that. It only turned into that because you realize Spider-Man is one of your most popular heroes, and now you want multiple versions of him. So you get Miles Morales, everybody's favorite tokenized character, who has the same goddamn backstory that Peter Parker had in the Ultimate Comics, the same exact one. Oh, Norman Osborn studying with this Oz formula into this spider. Right? Spider somehow gets out, escapes, bites a person. That person becomes a Spider-Man. Literally the same thing happened to Miles Morales. What are the odds? That's nonsense. It doesn't even make sense. They didn't even try to make it sense. They said, yo, we just gonna have the same fucking thing happen. The one of a kind thing, which was meant to be unique initially, that one of a kind thing, now we're gonna turn it into this. The mantle argument is just something that people want to fall back on, because I think it's for two different reasons. One, they're not even knowledgeable on this stuff and they want to embrace it. Like I've said, people like the idea of Miles Morales. They don't like Miles Morales because if they liked Miles Morales, they buy Miles Morales' books. Yet somehow, when we had like that accurate data going back like maybe like in March of last year, February of last year, he had like the 70th top selling book. His 15th and 16th issue. Nobody was buying that dumb shit. Nobody. They like the idea of Miles Morales. They don't like the character in Miles Morales. And to be fair, there's nothing out of him that we haven't seen really from Peter Parker, or a version of Peter Parker, or another copy of Peter Parker. Miles isn't even the first tokenized Spider-Man. They like the idea of him. And it doesn't require them to have any knowledge base. Everybody knows who Spider-Man is, what he is. To them, They don't understand the character, though. They don't understand why Peter Parker is Spider-Man because they haven't read any book. All they know is Spider-Man is a guy in a red and blue suit swinging around web slinging. That's what they think of Spider-Man, which is such a disservice to who Peter Parker is. But Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Bruce Wayne is Batman. It doesn't matter because you do all these reimaginings and be it rebooting another character. You got Tim Fox of the future is Black Batman. Batman is Bruce Wayne. When Batman becomes Bruce Wayne, that's unique to his situation, unique to his experience, unique to his backstory. It ain't a mantle. You only turned it into one because you wanted an excuse. Again, because a lot of folks don't read this shit. So to them, Batman is a guy in a bat suit, not necessarily slinging, ziplining maybe around, fighting crime without powers.
And so, and the comment continues. So it being easier, right? Yeah, your tokenized character is going to get that boost. Like I said earlier, brand recognition, marquee value, however you want to spell it, it's going to be easier because you're mooching off of the success of another character, their name. Because as long as it's Batman, people are going to go buy it. As long as it's Spider-Man, you're going to go buy it. Unless you're not a blind consumer. And then you look into what's being produced, and then you say, well, why are we getting all these different versions of the same character? I mean, speaking of Miles Morales, they're literally making him Captain America in a what if story. So you get a tokenization again. Miles Morales is the tokenized Spider-Man, and now he's going to be a tokenized Captain America. So it's almost like they're running out of ideas, which I've already said before that Hollywood is creatively bankrupt. Many people have said it. And it's true. Because how is it that, for example, when you have manga in Japan, they come up with new animes out the wazoo on anime and manga. They're pumping those things out. Each of them have their own individual unique stories with characters, and they can pump these out so many times, and a lot of people are liking it, especially here in the West, United States. People are eating it up, and they can come up with new and unique characters in their own universes. For example, One Piece, they have a load of characters, each with their own individual devil fruit powers. Devil fruit it's part of the universe. You'd have to go look up One Piece if you don't know what I'm talking about. But One Piece can come up with all these unique abilities for characters. And then I look over at Marvel and DC, and we're getting Black Superman, Black Batman, Black Spider-Man, different versions of Captain America. It's not just a black version of a white character. It's because tokenization is when you change the race, gender, or sexual orientation of a pre-established character. And this can go both ways, by the way.
Tokenism is the gender, race, or sexuality change of a pre-established character. We call this tokenism because it's usually only done one direction and it's purposeful and with intent. Once that tokenism occurs, we call that manifestation a tokenization, and it doesn't matter if there's a supposed mantle at play.
He says because they can have their own stories and be their own character. Again, they're not their own character. They're mooching off of the brand name of a pre-established character. That's not their own story. It's just a copy and paste, especially with Miles Morales. Miles Morales is a copy paste of Peter Parker Spider-Man. Instead of Miles Morales being his own unique character with his own unique set of abilities and costume, he's just the Black Spider-Man. And that's not unique. That's not their own story. It's not being their own character. You're just mooching off of a pre-established character, and people will eat it up. Going on. But white people playing black roles is not really the same thing. Could it work for some roles? Maybe. Who's to say a white kid playing Static Shock wouldn't work? Well, because you don't need it. Why would you want to retell the story of Static Shock using a tokenized version? We don't need a white Static Shock. And I'm not exactly sure what you mean when you say white people playing black roles is not really the same thing. Again, going back to what you were saying about the black experience, you're going to have to define what you mean by the black experience, because not every one person is going to have the same experience based on their skin color. And that's just the reality. But again, most black fictional characters are about the black experience and the years and years of shit that the black community has gone through. It's not the same as the white experience, which has been pretty privileged and spoiled as fuck. So that's where the difference comes in. Okay. I am fully aware of the hardships that the black community, particularly here in the US, has faced. You go back in history and you can see that. Let's not forget that every race under the sun has experienced some form of shit, as you put it. You say that white people or the white experience is pretty privileged and spoiled. Um, there's no doubt that plenty of white people are privileged and spoiled. But this argument about white privilege, again, this idea is ludicrous and it's ridiculous. And to say that the white experience is pretty privileged and spoiled, and now if you have to properly define it, because if you're trying to say that the majority of the white experience is privileged and spoiled, then you're naive and you're ignorant, because that is far from the truth. I'll give you an example. Talk to my father about white privilege. If you're of the idea that white privilege is prevalent here in the US, or that every white person has some form of white privilege, and this so that term white privilege, it sounds so ridiculous when you say it out loud, because when you really break down the social barriers and you have a nice flat landscape where everyone truly is equal, even though we most of the time are, particularly in this country, one skin color really doesn't make a difference, especially if you're in a scenario or a situation where it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. You know, people have to survive. You break down all the social barriers and you go to the basic need to survive, and skin color suddenly doesn't really make much of a damn difference. But you talk to my father about white privilege. My father is a white guy who grew up in the northeast of the United States, close to Chicago. Back in the 70s, there were steel mills. Well, even before then. But in the 70s, the steel mills shut down because all of the jobs were being moved over to China. As a result, any area around these steel mills became poverty stricken areas because the business left town. And this happened with my father. My grandfather left, so it was just my grandmother, my father, my aunt, and my uncle living in a poverty stricken area, which ended up becoming a mainly black area, chock full of lots of crime and poverty. And being that my father was white, or my family there was white, they were a white minority in a mostly black area. And most of my dad's friends were black. Okay. And it was hard for them. Now, if they had white privilege, because white privilege is this sort of, golden rod to cling on to that just solves all your fucking problems, your naive mind would say, well, he's a white guy, he'll be just fine. Well, the thing is that because my family was poor, they couldn't move out of the area. They were stuck there. So they had to make the best of a bad situation. Single mother, working multiple jobs, 3 kids to support. You want to talk about white privilege? I guarantee your mindset or your views on it is going to change at least just a little bit when you have a conversation with my father. And it's not even just my father. Many people, many white people, have had many different experiences. And every race under the sun has some form of privilege, though I would say that the real privilege is the privilege of being in a first world country where you can complain about things like white privilege and systemic racism. If you want to talk about systemic racism in the US, I'm going to laugh at you because these days that's ludicrous. If you still think that are there's systemic racism overall, are there areas in this country and even in the world that are still racist towards certain groups? Absolutely. I will not deny that whatsoever. With that said, to think that the entire country is still systemically racist, even though you literally had a black man as the US president, which is one of the most powerful positions in all the free world, twice being elected. Or if you look at sports, a majority of the athletes are black, and nobody's complaining about it. And again, Obama got put into office twice. So this idea of systemic racism is ridiculous. And those are only two examples. So this idea of the black experience, you have to define black experience, and you have to be very specific because many different people will have very different experiences. And it's not exclusive to race, but because you're talking about black experience and white privilege, this is where we are. Okay. And this is all about tokenization too, just as a reminder for you guys watching. But again, these are fictional characters, so they're not real. If they ever tried to make a white guy's Black Panther work, I'll give it a shot. I think it would fail because it kind of goes against what the character is, but sure, I'll watch. Okay. You can do whatever you want. You want to give white Black Panther a chance. They're never going to do it because the social media backlash would be hilarious to watch because they say you're going to whitewash Black Panther. And again, it's a hypocritical double standard. Even in this post, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. It is. Because you talk about whitewashing, you talk about that it really wouldn't work because it goes against what the character is, but yet it's completely okay to race swap other, white characters, but you race swap a black character with a white version and suddenly that goes against what the character is, completely disregarding the the race of another character just for the sake of getting what extra versions of the same character that we already have. It's hypocritical and it sounds lazy and unnecessary. So if they ever made a white Black Panther, I wouldn't watch it. I mean, I'm pretty much tuned out of Marvel and DC anyway. I've expressed before that I have no real desire to see the new Batman film, and it's not just because they tokenized Catwoman and Jim Gordon. It's just I've lost a lot of respect and desire to support DC Comics for their blatant identity politics driven nonsense, ruining these franchises just for the sake of appeasing supposed theoretical fans that won't really go to support this shit. And if you look at the comic sales, you can see that the American comics from Marvel and DC are on the decline, whereas manga is going up. And you have to ask yourself why. Why is it that we're getting our asses kicked in our own neighborhood in regards for comics, whereas manga is outpacing us significantly? You have to wonder why. Well, it's quite simple because a lot of the Japanese entertainment over there is focused on actually telling entertaining stories, whereas the American comics here are focused on identity politics and pushing some sort of social political message and agenda. And if you don't think that's happening, just watch the news. CNN, Fox, all these other mainstream corporations, they're all about pushing some sort of diversity and inclusion message, or they're inciting or trying to incite race wars. I mean, hell, if you want to talk about it, trying to incite a race war, just look at what happened with Jussie Smollett, where he literally faked a hate crime, saying that two MAGA hat wearing guys jumped him in an alley in Chicago at what 12:01 in the morning. That story stank to high heaven like no other. But he will most likely get off relatively scot free compared to, if someone else did it. And this is a Hollywood actor faking a hate crime, which would have incited more racial tension. That's sadistic, and that is evil. to do that. And there is no excuse for that. And it doesn't help that you continue to tokenize these characters, but then if they ever were to tokenize a black character or a non white character, people would lose their shit. Again, hypocritical, double standard. Nonsense. But a black Catwoman, hey man, it's been done since the 60s and it's perfectly fine. How is it perfectly fine? The idea that just because it was done back then doesn't justify doing it again today. Tokenization is tokenization. If you find it necessary to race swap, gender swap, sexuality swap any of these characters, just ask yourself, well, what's the purpose in doing it? And then just be honest about it. Just be honest and say, yeah, we're doing this to push a diversity and inclusion message, identity politics. That's what we're doing. Just be honest about it. We can at least give you credit for that. And the thing is, though, is that people will bring up logical counterpoints. So you want to promote, like, for example, the black community by tokenizing a white character. Why don't you just create a new black character? What you're doing is you're giving these tokenized characters the sloppy seconds of who they're based off of. That's what you're doing. You're not promoting real equality or diversity and inclusion. All those terms mean nothing these days anyway, but you're not giving real diversity by giving the sloppy seconds of a pre-established character. One of the benefits that Falcon had in Marvel is that he was his own black character. He wasn't based off of anybody. He wasn't tokenized. He wasn't a tokenized character at all. He was his own character. And what happened at the end of Avengers Endgame? Give him that fucking shield. You're the new Captain America. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You are now the new Captain America, the black Captain America. He could have stayed as Falcon. You could have put the mantle of Captain America to bed. Don't give it to Bucky. Don't give it to Wilson. You just leave Captain America alone. His fucking story is over. Iron Man story over. You stick with you bring up your new characters. You have an entire Marvel catalog of heroes that you could pluck out and make movies about. But instead you want to tokenize them and push this diversity and inclusion message and try and justify tokenization because it's to promote a certain community. That's stupid. That is ridiculous. And people aren't going to support it. Eventually people are going to catch on to what's happening. I mean, it's already happening. As I already said, the American comic sales are going down for Marvel and DC. Manga is kicking ass, as well it should. It's just the problem is that we need to have good American comics as well. I have no problem enjoying manga. I am a manga and anime fan. But we need to have good American comics as well. Because as it's going right now, Marvel and DC, they're fucking dead on arrival. Any kind of project I'm not excited about. I don't care who's involved. It's most likely dead on arrival. And I don't want this to be true. That's the thing. I don't want to go and hate on Marvel and DC because I'm a fan of Batman, Wolverine, right? I like these characters. I don't want to be destroying them. Okay, I want to be able to enjoy it. I don't want to have to be complaining about entertainment when you should be enjoying it. It's just I'm not going to be a blind consumer. I'm not just going to blindly consume what I'm being given. A, a white Black Panther? Why the fuck would you even go down that road? Why would you give it a chance when you're saying it would probably fail? Why would you even go that route? What would be the point? What would be the purpose? It just seems like you're just blindly consuming shit. That seems very unnecessary. And look, you do whatever you want to do, but for me, that just sounds completely and utterly ridiculous. Or a black Spider-Man, like Spider-Man said, anyone can wear the mask. Yeah, maybe that's what the new version said, but the thing about Spider-Man is that he had a very unique situation about him. He was bitten by a unique spider, right place, right time, very unique circumstances and situation. Okay. But then you clone that shit with Miles Morales and say, oh, yeah, look, Black Spider Man. And then when his comics failed, you brought him into the Ultimate Universe, then you brought him into the mainline universe. And you keep giving this character a chance, even though the comic sales are, it's not reflective of success. It's reflective of people not being interested in the shit. A black Jim Gordon, cool. It's still Jim Gordon. Tokenized Jim Gordon, not necessary. You're cool with whatever works. Well, it's not really working. I mean, this Batman movie is doing pretty well. Aside from the tokenizations, people are saying it's a really good film. I don't really care. I'm not really interested. That's just how I am at this point with Marvel and DC. Because any of this new stuff that they come out with, I know it's going to be lackluster. You know, for example, Falcon the Winter Soldier and the Loki TV series, both of those I was actually excited to watch. When I watched it, I was vehemently disappointed. Falcon the Winter Soldier felt like they were trying to do race baiting and identity politics and trying to push, you know, these sort of political agendas about immigrants and such. And that was annoying. Loki, you get tokenized Loki, first of all, the female Loki. This should have been about her. Well, it was about her. And you shouldn't have called it Loki. You should have called it something else because Loki took a back seat in his own series. They made him out to be a complete and utter buffoon, and they humiliated the character of Loki in his own show. And to that I say, fuck it. You know, I got through the rest of the series and I said, okay, bye Marvel. I gave you a chance. Now I'm fucking done. That's it. And then that's it as far as the comment is. But here's some helpful advice. Don't go support the people that hate you. The people that say things like you're a toxic fan if you don't like a certain brand, franchise, whatever. Do yourself a favor. Don't give money to the people that don't like you. They like your money, but they don't like you. If you're leaning in a certain political direction, or even if you're not, even if you're not on the opposite side of them, you can just be a neutral in the middle and say, yeah, I don't really agree with what you guys are saying. They say, well, fuck you then. You're just the enemy. You're just like them. It's like, okay, whatever. So that's it. Identity politics, tokenization, they're all connected. There is an assault against white people because of the sins of the past. Slavery. People love to mention slavery here in the US and how white people enslaved black people. But they will, funny enough, ignore when white people were enslaved by black people. Barbary pirates. It was the African slave trade. I forgot the exact name, but look it up because white people were enslaved too. But you don't hear white people complaining about wanting reparations. I think the whole reparation shit is nonsense anyway. But, you know, it's convenient to ignore history when it suits your point of view. So that's it. Thank you to Mother Mulder, J-Man from J-Man's Movie Cave, and Kyle Curtis Flett, part of the Dark Aether Files Patreon. We always appreciate your support. And if you guys are interested in supporting this channel, getting extra content such as movie reviews and juicy details on my comic series, Echo 115, coming soon, then you can go support us on Patreon. We have a great community going there so far. And with that all being said, thank you guys very much for watching, listening, and supporting. And until next time, my fellow investigators, remember that the entertainment is out there. I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter.
I'm Special Agent Carter Sauce.
Special Agent Dr. Richtofen.
And until next time, fellow investigators, remember
the entertainment is out there.